Hey everybody, it's close to the midterm. This is chapter 5, week 5, and we're still planning. There's a lot to it, but it is worth it. And this is predictive waterfall project management. We detail out the scope and all the other knowledge areas, and we apply controls to minimize risk. So let's get going, shall we? Oh, I didn't want that. I want to do this for you. Okay. These are the learning objectives. Pause here, review them at your leisure. So, continuing with planning, right? After we have understood integration management, which is our job to manage all of these processes that you see, and you'll see them detailed out there, about 50 of them, maybe a little less, right? You're using your 7 processes in integration management to manage all of these and control them. So it's kind of cool. So after integration and scope, next comes schedule, the second part of that triple constraint, right? And then cost. This will wrap up the triple constraint: scope, schedule, and cost. Now, for schedule management, I'll tell you what, most projects fail because of scope. We established that in the previous week. But I will tell you, you will spend most of your time as a project manager working on the schedule and communication, right? So this is a pretty important area. And you will have a schedule manager who will report to you. And when they bring you the initial schedule plan, you're going to have to integrate it. You're going to have to make sure it matches the budget that has come in, that it matches that it'll build the scope, etc. And so the contents of a schedule management plan, any management plan, this time in schedule, I've said this previously. In fact, let me go back to drawing. I hope that's useful. Any management plan, in this case schedule management plan, is going to detail out how I'm going to run schedule management throughout the project, including control, okay? And formats, things I want my team members to use. Now, we use a term in schedule management called activities. Notice in scope, we never use the term activity. Every time you see the word activity, they're actually talking about the schedule, okay? And so an activity is that distinct scheduled portion of the work performed, right? So it's further breaking down your work breakdown structure, but it's no longer developing the requirements. That was done in scope. Now it's about what activities are needed to support the work breakdown structure, right? So remember in the work breakdown structure when I said building a bike, and I said you need a front tire and a rear tire. Well, the activities I need in the front tire is to purchase the rubber that goes around the rim, purchase the rim, construct the rim, right? These are all activities that support the work breakdown structure in scope that says, hey, we need a front tire, right? And that's what activities are. They're not adding requirements. They're just fulfilling the work package in the work breakdown structure. And so you'll want to create an entire activity list. And that activity list has attributes. You know what it sounds like? It sounds just like in scope management, the WBS. The WBS doesn't have a lot in it, but it's important because it's a hierarchy that helps us organize. And remember, we talked about the WBS dictionary, right? Had the details. Well, the activity list is like that WBS except for schedule management. And the attributes are the details of each item in that activity list. So just like the WBS and WBS dictionary always go together, because I've got to have the details with the plan, well, so does the attributes, activity attributes, always go with the activity list. They aren't separated at all. And so it would make sense that we're back to talking about a work breakdown structure, right? So when a deliverable is decomposed, and that's what we've done. When we built this hierarchy, that's called decomposition. That's the tool used to build my work breakdown structure. So I get this decomposition, right? Remember, this is all the work required for a deliverable. Now, underneath that, okay, come the activities. So this is all about scope, right? And ends in a work package. That's the lowest layer of a WBS, right? I will continue to decompose it, but these are going to be activities. They're not new requirements, as I said. They are activities, schedule activities with the attributes list that we just talked about that is going to support building out the work breakdown structure. And here's a picture of it. This is the work package, the lowest layer. This is scope, right? This has nothing to do with schedule. When you further decompose, as we said, into activities, these are activities that support or build the work package. They are not new requirements. These are things you have to do to build that work package, okay? So important distinction. So this would be an example of your activity list plus the attributes that go with them, right? It's a lot of details. Notice I always said put assumptions down, and assumptions become risks to me because it's assumed true without proof. Also in schedule management at this point, I want to create a milestone list because I'm talking about the schedule. I'm talking about what are key markers that I want to shoot for and advertise with the senior leaders. So a milestone is considered a significant point in a project. A milestone will have no cost or duration, zero cost or duration, because it's just a point in time, and it's usually represented by a diamond on a schedule, okay? And the milestones help you have a conversation with sponsors and senior leaders. They don't normally want to talk all the detail in your schedule. There's a lot. They're counting it. They're paying you to do that, to integrate it. But they want to know the milestones and risks along the way. Okay? So this would be a sample milestone list. Do you remember the other place we talked about milestones, just as a quick review, was in the charter. In the charter, we will list some high-level milestones. Okay? And now, and this is the last place we really talk about it, in schedule, we're going to add other milestones. And it's the project manager that's detailing these out. Okay. Here's a best practice. Whenever you're making criteria for milestones, a milestone should be SMART, right? It should be specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-bound. Okay. That is a very common acronym used for defining what's a good milestone. I even use SMART when I define my performance at the end of a year for my performance feedback session. So SMART can be used in multiple capacities. In this case, we like to define a milestone in terms of SMART, okay? And this helps us reduce risk on this along the schedule by keeping an eye on key aspects of it. So once I have all my activities, now I have an activity list with the attributes. Now that's just an activity list. Now I need to put them in order, and that means sequencing them, right? What has to come first, right? I've got to have a bike spokes before I can build a bike rim. I've got to have a bike rim before I can put on the tires, etc., right? So it's really, sequencing is all about dependencies or the relationships between activities. Some things have to come first, some things come second, and that's called sequencing, and that's really going to give you your schedule in its order. Now, when I talk about dependencies, there are 4 types of dependencies. One is mandatory. Those are things that have to happen. I must wake up in the morning before I can go to work, a mandatory dependency. There's a discretionary dependency, which is, like a best practice, right? So with a best practice would be when I wake up in the morning, brush my teeth. But I got to be honest, if I'm running late, I'm not sure. That's kind of gross. No, brush your teeth anyhow. But my point is, it's not mandatory. It's discretionary. And you'll have those on your projects with your activities. A third one are external dependencies that are going to be brought upon you. Maybe the customer says, I can't have this part of the project begun before March 1st because I'm about to make a major announcement, right? That's an external dependency. And an internal dependency would be something from within the project team or the company, within your control, such as testing, but it has to happen before you move on. The gate checks that we talked about at the end of each phase are a type of, so here's your phase. At the end, you do a gate check. If you remember when we were talking about the life cycle, that would be an example of an internal dependency. All of this, when I put the activities together in a sequence we just talked about, is going to form a network diagram. We're very close to our schedule. In project management, we use what's called activity on arrow. Actually, we use activity on arrow is the old way. Let me correct that. Now we do activity on node, AON. So let me take a step back. We always do, let me change the color. We always do the precedence diagramming method. Precedence, that should make you remember the word sequencing. Sequence, which we just did. Precedence, what comes first? And so I will always do PDM. PDM comes in two forms. AOA, area on activity on arrow, which we don't do anymore, and AON. AOA was good when we did it manually by hand with a big chart. Now we do use a computer, we do activity on node. And each box or circle is the node itself. That's where the activity is happening. So we're going to do PDM, and it's going to be activity on node. So here's an example of AOA. So notice the activity is happening on the actual arrow itself. This is where the activity duration is happening on the arrow. That's not the case with activity on node. With activity on node, it would be a square instead, and the activity would happen right on the square. It's a little bit different, but it's actually quite similar too. So anyhow, more on network diagrams. We'll go into that in some detail shortly. But anyhow, the network diagrams, keep in mind that it represents activities. This is about the schedule that is done to complete the scope, right? Because remember, we had a WBS that we decomposed, and then we further decomposed it into these activities to form our schedule. So these activities are done to complete the scope, just tying those, linking those topics together, okay? And every activity on the network diagram must be completed for the project to finish, okay? We're not going to do AOA, so I'm going to skip through that. It is still useful and worth the read in the book. We will do activity on node, okay, which also represents, remember I said both are PDMs, both are precedence diagramming methods, PDM. Okay, but we're going to do activity on node. It uses a box instead of a circle. It will include a duration, a start date, an end date, and I will have dependent relationships defined between those. Okay, now those relationships go like this: finish to start. So I have to finish waking up before I can start getting ready for work. Or start to start. Maybe I will start waking up while the coffee started as an activity automatically in my pot. Finish to finish. I have to finish waking up before I can finish brushing my teeth, and then start to finish. This is least used. This is the most common. This finish to start. This is the only one you really need to know. This is the least common, and it's almost just academic. I could give you some examples, but not for this course. So here's an example of precedence. So notice activity A, it has to be done before D and C begin. Activity B has to be done before E. But before E can start, C and B must both be done for E to begin. And that's precedence with the flow through the network, finish to start. Okay, I'm going to pause there and come back with the next part shortly.